Welcome back to a podcast to answer your questions on addiction, recovery, and mental health by Wiseman Method Advanced Treatment for Opioid Dependence. I'm your co-host, Dwight Hurst, joined as always by Claire Wiseman and David Livingston. We're here to answer your questions about addiction, recovery, mental health treatment. We have a great topic to talk about today. So our question today is, how do we cope with the early days of being sober? And just now, as we settled on that question, we could go right into what you were saying, Claire, about how common that question is and what feelings kind of attend that kind of a question.
Yes, the amount of anxiety surrounding that question, not just for the patients themselves, but for loved ones that are feeling so insecure about what to do, how to help, and all the above. It should start with expectations, expectations of what to expect from the patient or from even the treatment, what the treatment had offered, and life itself. I'm going to let David keep on going here.
I do a lot of conference calls with family members when they get home and sometimes even beforehand, and just to kind of, to set some expectations about, what to do. And one of the first things I say is just listen to each other. Whoever's been detoxed, they'll tell you what they can do. If you just talk to them and you listen to what they have to say, you're sensitive to how they're feeling. Often, there's trouble regulating sleep afterwards, and so that can be difficult. So depending on how they're feeling, it'll dictate what they can really do. I think it's common for there to be sort of ups and downs in terms of energy. It'll be pretty good at times, and then it'll decrease at times. In general, you don't want to push people too much too soon. That can be a condition for increasing frustration and at worst, relapse or other problems. You want to create a runway that's long enough for them to return and kind of land safely and be okay. So in general, I'd say maybe that's a place to start.
It sounds like you're kind of trying to shape those expectations in a realistic way as well, then, right? I mean, you're saying, because having expectations that are too rigid could be a disaster in this scenario, I would think.
People often relapse because life is too much, or they don't feel like they can get things done, or they're trying to cope in some way. The goal isn't good coping mechanisms. The goal is, and not that we don't need good coping mechanisms, we do. So let me say that. But the goal isn't to be coping. The goal is to be living well, and to be in touch with our what we're capable of, and to be able to sort of be attuned in a way in which you're making adjustments so you can rest when you need to rest, and you can get things done when you need to do that, and so forth. And so just in a general way,
there is some kind of unrealistic expectation of what treatment is as well. I hear a lot of people going home and expecting life to be wonderful, and their partners to sound nicer and to be nicer, and life to be less stressful. So I think understanding the goal of treatment in what you have received, and when you go back, the benefits of that, and everything else you need to work with in time, with time. It's really, really important. I hear a sense of frustration on everybody. Why did he not wake up early? Why didn't he go to work? Why does my wife expect me to this or that? Things that didn't happen before, and just because you went through treatment doesn't mean it's going to happen when you get back home, if ever. But if that is something that is bothering you, it's something you will have to work with, regardless if you've been through treatment or not. We all need to work in ourselves and in our relations, and as David said, make our lives as good as possible to live in.
It goes with that mentality to say that problems sometimes get all thrown under the addiction umbrella, right? In a way to say, oh, if you stop using drugs, if you stop abusing opiates, you stop drinking, you stop whatever it is, then our problem is solved. And as we often talk about, addiction is typically it's a symptomatic of other problems, or it sometimes is even an attempt at a solution for a problem more than it is a problem itself. So when you stabilize that problem, all it does is it opens up the healthy avenues and energy to hopefully healthily resolve the other problems that are there that it was maybe being triggered by in the first place. And I think we
Correct.
over identify exactly what you're saying, which is, well, and particularly in the early days when it's not even like a destination, it's just you've started a process. And to say, oh, well, great, you've done the detox right, you're not using the meds anymore, and so we're good, right? I mean, nobody says it that way, but sometimes that expectation sneaks in, right?
I think that expectation is also, happens because um, most times family members and the patient themselves will blame addiction for everything, everything in their lives. So once there is treatment, there is a thought that the treatment treated everything that was wrong in everybody's life that is um, involved with that person themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is unreal. And if there is such large expectations, there will be a failure on every level possible.
I wonder if it's
So
kind of worthwhile for people to talk about those expectations, what they are beforehand. David, it sounds like that's something that you do with people, is maybe try to air out those expectations and say, okay, what are we expecting that's unrealistic here? What are we setting ourselves up for here?
Whenever possible, I think it helps because it's confusing, and there's hope, and and everybody wants to see people functioning well and doing well. And I think that when we see people active and taking care of things, it puts other family members at ease, and they feel like they're doing well. And it's not necessarily the case, but it can be. But so you're right, and that's why I the first thing I say is you talk to each other and listen to each other. Because also in a family, if so, maybe someone's partner comes and gets detoxed, and they're holding down the home and the fort and taking care of everything, and their expectation is, okay, I'm going to get relieved of everything when you get back, and and so those and it's understandable that they would want that, and so it's it's parsing those needs and expectations and just kind of trying to create a realistic understanding of what's possible, and deal with the frustrations and it's just but that's an ongoing thing. I think one of the important things is that, especially when it comes to families or people in relationships, it's always an ongoing negotiation of needs. So you're negotiating each other's needs based on kind of where the other person's at, what they can realistically do, and that's a hard thing, but that goes on forever.
Yeah. Are there things that people do that you've seen successfully executed that make people feel really good? Like, let's say someone gets home from detox. Do you ever get that feedback of like, wow, here's what was waiting for me? There's a warm blanket and a hug. I don't know. That sounded a little overly simplistic the way I just said it. But are there things that you've come across in the positive direction where people have had some wins in this area?
I don't
Sure.
know about David. I see a tremendous amount of positive feedback, especially how they feel in relationship, you know, to their kids or to simple things that could give them a tremendous amount of pleasure in life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just not to have the that need to seek the drug or to the concern of where I'm going to get it or what's going to happen. I think it gives people a sense of relaxation and an ability to enjoy a lot of the things that was around them and they couldn't see.
So if they go with that mentality then of like, I'm looking for those things, here's those things that I've been missing out on. I can start to see those, and kind of looking for that is maybe a good mentality to have.
I think in life, looking at the positive, blessings we have, and again, we spoke that off air a little while ago. Things that we know it's our blessings in our lives, but we kind of see them as things that we should have, or is due to us. I think the last 2 years showed us that we shouldn't rely on anything that should be there or is due to us, and we should be very appreciative of the small things and the blessings we have around us. And I think once you don't have the effects of a numbing device like alcohol or opiates or something like this, you are more able to enjoy those simple things as as almost as an euphoria of blessings,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
It makes sense to
Yeah.
me. I think that sometimes one of the things that happens when we're trapped in addictive cycles is we miss out on those things, and we sometimes think that they don't apply to us even, right? We almost feel like, oh, I can't get that enjoyment anymore. And I think that's a big mistake that carries over sometimes into getting sober, is we somehow think of ourselves as damaged to some irreparable point. No one will ever forgive me. Do you find that people underestimate how much the people in their lives want to forgive them or work with them? I mean, kids usually, and close loved ones, oftentimes more than we think, really want reconciliation and reconnection.
I think there's a less of an expectation from kids. All they want is to be loved and want you to be there for them. So I think that's why I brought up kids before. I think it's just easier. It's that first really natural, light connection.
I mean, I people talk so much about the messages they're getting from loved ones or friends when they're here, and they talk about who hasn't contacted them and supported them. It's so important to just even send a message like, I'm thinking of you and wishing you the best, and I think it really helps the process of getting better. I think it helps the return for everyone, and like you're both talking about the gratitude and the feeling of being supported during a difficult time. There's a desire to sort of return and repay people and be there for them, and there's a good feeling that is created. And when people are talking about that, if I'm doing a conference call, one of the first things I always do when they've been telling me, yeah, I'm getting all the support from my families, one of the first things I always do is say, such and such has been so grateful for all the support you've been giving them. It's meant so much, and it's helped them in their treatment and so forth. And I just want to let you know that's been, I've been hearing about it and how important that is, because it's critical that whole process starts to get reinstated. As you're both talking about, and probably I focus at times on, the things that are wrong in these conversations, but the other side of it is probably as important and maybe even more important, that there's just the support and just the feeling that there's people who've got your back and care about you is so important.
I like that you're taking a minute then to highlight it, and it's also good reinforcement. I mean, if you look at it, not to not to be the guy to take down the nuts and bolts of a really just like beautiful interaction, but to say it also reinforces it, right? That behavior modification. We tend to do things more if they're rewarded or reinforced. And I think by stopping to highlight and say, hey, what you're doing is really helping. They told me it was, and they're in a bad place right now. They wouldn't say that unless it really was. It's like, wow, that feels good. That's like a little bit of a reward, and it also helps me know I'm on the right direction. Because many times for loved ones, what we really want is, I want to do something effective. I want to do something that's going to actually help my loved one in their treatment. And we get so much, we've done episodes where we've talked about this, about some of the problems with the language we use with enabling or codependent, or it's all so poorly defined. And I think it is important to do what you're describing, which is to take a minute and explain to people exactly what they're doing that is healthy. I think that's very powerful.
No question. It's and so and in fact, it might be the most useful part of the whole thing, because really what they want to know and need to understand is how they can support each other, and how the person coming home can be supportive too, and help them understand, and how they can talk to each other, and really, like you're both talking about, move it into a different type of process where there's a feeling of I'm back home, and like, how can we do everything better for each other?
Absolutely. And it triggers more of that communication too. It's good modeling for the person to know that they can talk about that. I think that in some cases, some people are really naturally good at this and some just aren't. Talking about things openly that are uncomfortable to talk about is obviously one of the first ways to heal or fix anything when it comes to relationship issues, right? But some people are like, well, I don't want to mention something that's going to make you feel bad. Well, I don't want to mention something that's going to make you feel bad either. And so we just never mention anything. When we're talking about this kind of thing, we sometimes have to be willing to make that little bit of step to say, hey, this makes us both uncomfortable. Why don't we talk about it for just a minute? And if we're approaching it and we know that the goal is some kind of healing, or that we're trying to encourage success, then I think it becomes easier to talk about things. Talking about things as a sort of a project management perspective, as a team, as a family, those kinds of things I think that's one of the early steps that can set up people for a tremendous success. Or I guess if they don't, it sets them up the other direction for relapse and struggles,
I think learning how to communicate is much more complicated than just communicating. It's where people are coming from, their frustration levels, their reasons for communicating, how they are communicating. I mean, there's so much past and history on, every sentence. It's not that simple, and it's a process. It's a healing process. I think not just for the person, but just how to learn to grow that relationship in a way that is healthy for everybody involved. So yeah, learning to communicate. I think you have to take a lot of stones from that, from the weight of that communication, in order to make it at least for the person that just became drug free or substance free, for them to be able to respond in a effective way, in a productive way. I think a lot of weight has to be taken off that conversation. It has to be light, at least in the beginning.
One huge part of a relationship is being able to have like meaningful work throughs when it comes to like big problems and hefty things and setting goals and life plans. But if you think of it, at least half, if not more, of what we want from a relationship is to enjoy being in the relationship. For a certain amount of time, we may want to say the serious conversations in the very early days, we may need to determine that some of that needs to be on hold for a minute. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings on this. This is probably a topic for a whole nother show. But when you get people that get into court ordered treatment or they get into criminal charges, one of the really big problems with that a lot of times is that they have to deal with big, hefty decisions while at the same time terminating their unhealthy coping skill at the same exact time. So I got to be talking to a lawyer or making legal decisions or looking at how my life's impacted practically and making those huge decisions while at the same time ostensibly getting off the drugs right now. And it is not conducive. It would be much better if we could say, let's do some treatment for a while and then worry about major life decisions. But that's not how that
But that's
plays
what
out.
that's what we spoke in the beginning, is the expectations.
Yeah.
So the court is expecting a person that has not been able to make, healthy decisions for a long time to suddenly make all the right decisions for their lifetime, legally, emotionally, health-wise, everything.
Yeah.
So obviously those expectations are not going to be met.
Right.
So it's what should you expect of, again, treatment, of which treatment? Is it physical detox? What you expect from psychological treatment? What you expect, from social assistance? I mean, there's several factors that cannot be included in one umbrella because that doesn't work. I mean, patients, we hear all the time parents asking, how much therapy are they going to get at Domus? That's our aftercare.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be assessed for psychiatric issues? And they want everything to be solved in that week over there. And we often tell them it's there's a reason why people use substances because they can't handle too much. So you can't just remove it and just throw everything at them because now you're giving them a reason to go back. We have to be really, really honest with ourselves and with families and patients of what we are providing and what is our abilities to provide. Not overextend, because absolutely everybody wants to help everybody as much as they can and give you, as many solutions as we can. But we cannot. We have to be very aware of our limitations so others don't feel like they failed.
The development of a life. You don't think that that somebody goes and takes 4 or 5 classes in something and or takes goes to take 4 or 5 classes in playing the flute, and they're going to walk out completely competent and virtuosa and but the feeling is like at times the expectation is that things have been solved. And I think, like you're both saying, it is an ongoing process. It's a beginning, and there can be some real understanding and insight, and a course can be set that people feel and believe in. I think if that happens, it's been a hugely successful treatment for what it is. But that's an ongoing thing. And I think the thing that surprises me so much is that, and maybe that's why we're all talking about it, is that doesn't seem to be the normal perspective. It's the normal perspective is you go away and then you're done and that you've solved it. And that is really, and not always, but really you've got to get into ongoing treatment because your needs and the difficulties of the world and everything else just continues and continues and continues. And you've got to be working on it, for everybody in some way. You get to decide how you want to do that, but challenges come.
I wonder what you think of. There's a sort of commonality of thought that people talk about a lot, which is trying to avoid not only major life decisions during the first while of becoming sober, but also even avoiding new life situations if possible, as much as possible. For example, I have a friend of mine who's a nurse practitioner who does prescriptions mostly for psychiatric conditions, and he's been through recovery process and helped a lot of people with addiction. And he always says, they say you shouldn't date anybody for a year after getting sober. And he said, I don't know about that, but he said, I will say that during the first 6 months of being sober, I don't even suggest anybody buy a new plant for their house. So if you look at that and say there's this feeling of be careful in the first steps, not to change your life too dramatically before you have landed on your feet securely. And I know, none of the three of us are big fans of making general blanket statements about what everyone
That's
should
where
do.
I was going right now. Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to
think,
bring it up and see what people think about this.
I think general statement or radical statements are as damaging. So yes, you can buy a plant, and maybe you're gonna hate the plant.
Yeah.
Give it to your neighbor. I think a general statement is not healthy, but I think radical statements are even unhealthier.
Right. Yeah, reinforcing, you kind of doubling down on that process, right? Do you think that
Even David said
Yeah.
something right now, David, that ongoing treatment. I think the word ongoing treatment makes people very, in a way, hopeless. Of what's the point of going to treatment if I'm going to have a lifetime, of treatment. I don't think it's necessarily, ongoing treatment forever. I think we have to work on ourselves the rest of our lives, period. We have to better ourselves, so we've got to make ourselves healthier, but it doesn't mean you have to be in treatment, forever. And if you could clarify that, I think it's just going to help people, reach out for treatment.
Yeah, it's not that, right? Nobody is in ongoing treatment forever, but and people get to decide what they need, and some people don't need necessarily ongoing treatment, and some people do need help with it because there's things they just need to work on more. So it depends, but I think the idea is what you just said, is that we have to work on our lives and develop ourselves if we want our lives to develop forever, and to some degree, and it doesn't mean that you have to be in anything specifically if you don't want to. So I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying that as a way of keeping an open mind, that and in terms of figuring out what you need. So you need it. It's a possibility. If you're having trouble sleeping, or you've got a history of sleep issues, and that's a big problem, go and get some help figuring that out. Right? Don't just assume that So it's sometimes the thing that you're dealing with that's been most painful is, I spoke with someone just recently, and they were saying, like, the worst thing for me is to not have anything to do or be alone. And if loneliness and sort of boredom is the thing that is most painful, and there's a history of reasons for that, then not getting a plant and not seeing other people or getting in a relationship may not be the right thing.
It's the worst thing, right? Terrible idea.
Right. But make sure it's the right person, right? You don't want the loneliness to drive you into something that's not right for you or not good for you, or be with somebody who's, doesn't know how to support you in the way you need. So there's a parsing even of that need, to make sure that it's something that's healthy. So, but yes.
Well, and it is something that I think gets wrapped up in the idea of a broken person, to say that, okay, now you're working on some treatment stuff, but don't think you can go making decisions about your life. So, and the flip of that, the reverse of that, and is kind of what we're saying is, instead of maybe taking a mentality that in the early days of my own recovery and treatment, rather than say I got to be super careful I don't screw up everything, maybe I should be looking at it more of like, oh, actually I should try to trust and have some confidence that I am a capable person.
I think also capable person of bettering yourself in every aspect of your life. So it doesn't mean that, addiction should be it and will solve everything. So I think if we take a lighter approach to treatment, the expectations of what's going to happen after treatment are going to be more attainable. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to better not just, my health of not using, illicit drugs or too much drugs, but I'm going to eat better. I'm going to try to exercise so I can sleep better. I'm going to try to have, a more productive life so I can feel better about myself. And again, it doesn't need to all happen in the first week. It's just, I think, is an attitude. It's a goal. What is the story of the people that starts a diet every Monday? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna get into a diet because I'm gonna lose weight. It's if you keep saying you just want to lose weight, you usually are not going to be able to lose weight. But I'm going to start eating healthier because I want to be healthier, and I don't want to have all the health issues of being overweight. That's a different story. So I think is an overall attitude that curbs expectations.
You're saying kind of that,
and it's so much wider.
Yeah, it's kind of like a more positively stated goal. What do I want to add and bring into my life, rather than what do I want to eliminate? And that's
correct.
Such an automatic trap to fall into with addiction, because if I'm using illicit drugs or using drugs, abusing them, I want to stop abusing them. Of course I do. But then that becomes enveloping, and we focus too much on that being essentially that is a goal of take away a thing rather than add a thing. And adding a thing is always more motivational too.
And again, you're not adding a thing. You're adding so many things. You're adding the ability of feeling pleasure to several things that surround you that you don't even know they're there.
Thank you for being here so much. Please go and rate and review this podcast on your podcatcher of choice. We really appreciate it. It helps in certain ways to spread the message. There's algorithms and things that help people to find podcasts that have higher ratings. If you would like to share your questions with us so that we can talk about them on the show, please go on Twitter @opiates or email us anytime at info@opiates.com. That's OPIATES. Our show is brought to you, of course, by Wiseman Method Advanced Treatment for Opioids and Rapid Detox Center. Our music is the song Medical by Clean Mind Sounds. For Claire Wiseman and David Livingston, I've been Dwight Hurst, joining you today. Our show is produced by Pop Collar Productions, a company that will help you to set up your podcast as well. Check us out at www.popcollar.net. Until we're here again with you, please make sure to keep asking questions, because if you're able to ask questions, then you'll be able to find answers. And if you can find answers, you can always find hope. Bye-bye for now. Be safe.